Hi, Kartik Krishna here for the Florida Squeeze, and I've gotten a couple of requests from people to talk a little bit about the left, progressive left, and progressives backing Donald Trump, what I call the alt left. And in fact, a lot of the people on the alt left are people I used to travel with ideologically, but don't anymore. And I feel like I have some bona fides to talk about them. I'm someone who opposed the Iraq War before the war started, was protesting in the streets before the war started. I opposed the war in Afghanistan, something a lot of people claimed they opposed before, but they didn't. There was one vote in Congress against the authorization of military force against Afghanistan in the furor after 9/11. That was Barbara Lee. She was the only one who voted against it. The Iraq War was very popular as well. Very few voted against it. In the Senate, I remember Robert Byrd made great speeches, and Barbara Boxer, Ted Kennedy, a few others were against Carl Levin, who was the chair of the Armed Service Committee. He was against the war. And of course, the great Paul Wellstone, the last vote he cast, was against that military authorization. But it was still only 19 senators that opposed it. So people like to say they were against the wars before they started, but most weren't. And I was against the Afghan war, I'll admit, for ethnic reasons. I don't like ethnic politics. I've grown to loathe identity politics. But at the time, being South Asian, I felt an invasion of Afghanistan was an invasion of South Asia. It wasn't something I supported. I felt like it was an attack, an unwarranted attack. So anyway, and I'm someone who more recently, out of solidarity with people who did not have health care, since that was such a big issue after 2016, I voluntarily didn't go to the doctor for several years, which was a mistake as it turns out, because I do have health problems. But I felt, why should I take advantage of my privilege, which the progressives and many of the people I traveled with were attacking, if others don't have health care? So I stood in solidarity with them, didn't go to the doctor for years. So I feel like I have some bona fides. But what I've seen since the 2020 primaries, since Bernie Sanders dropped out and endorsed Joe Biden, very quickly endorsed Joe Biden, and AOC and other progressives kind of folded back into the mainstream Democratic Party, is some unbelievably destructive and, in my opinion, narcissistic behavior led by the likes of Jimmy Dore, Tulsi Gabbard, now RFK Jr., and many influencers on social media who are progressives. People I know, people who I've interacted with for years, people who have subsequently blocked me simply because I was advocating for Joe Biden's election in 2020. People who said that I was lying or I had sold out or been bought off, which wasn't the case. You can go look. I didn't make any money off of the campaign in 2020 or in 2022, right? And some of these people I'm sure did. I'm sure some of these people are grifting with their radio programs and their blogs or what have you in order to attack the Democrats. But the Dick Cheney endorsement, the Liz Cheney endorsement, seemed to have sent these people over the top in their condemnations of the Democratic Party and their claims that the Democrats are worse than the Republicans, which it's laughable on the surface, but I feel like I need to address it. And there are people who have asked me to address it. So I'm going to get down to the brass tacks as far as I'm concerned. I think a lot of people on what was the progressive left, but now is the alt left, the people who broke with Bernie Sanders after he endorsed Joe Biden, the people who broke with AOC, the people who agitate on social media, the people who now seem to be either very comfortable with backing Donald Trump or spend their days just attacking Democrats without saying they're for Trump, is that they have a very awkward relationship with power. They've never known how to use power. They've never known how to trust power. They've never actually understood how the legislative process works or the importance of backing people in legislative bodies who then might then influence the debate. And maybe you don't get a full loaf, but you move the consensus toward you. So they don't understand AOC's long game. They don't understand a lot of what Bernie Sanders has done. They, quite frankly, don't understand a lot of what Anna Eskamani does, a great progressive here on state level here in Florida. So I think they have uncomfortable relationship with power, and they assume anyone who obtains power and learns how to use power is somehow been corrupted. So, and they don't respect those who walk away from power either. Because I have to tell you, I have very little in common with Dick Cheney or Liz Cheney. I'm someone, I just said, protested the Iraq War, thought the worst of the Cheneys, ran out and watched Vice the day it came out. I don't go to the movie theater often. I usually wait for movies to come on video or whatever, now these days on digital, right? But first day, the Friday it opened, I was there. Adam McKay's movie. But I respect Liz Cheney immensely because this is someone who had the power. This is someone who was on track to be the Speaker of the House. This was someone who had a last name that put her, after 2 terms, or after 1 term in the House, into the Republican leadership, the number 3 Republican in the House, with 2 very weak figures ahead of her. Well, I mean, Scalise isn't that weak, but he has health problems. McCarthy, very weak, as we've seen. She could have been Speaker of the House if she had just played along. But guess what? Her inner conscience forced her to make a choice. Her inner conscience forced her to stand up, stand proud. Her inner conscience forced her to effectively concede a safe seat that she could have held for the rest of her life, for another 20 years or so, to stand on principle. I respect those people. That's a profile in courage. And to see the alt-left now say, okay, this justifies why I don't like Kamala Harris and I don't like Joe Biden and I'm going to support Donald Trump or I'm going to vote third party. But let's face it, a lot of them are voting for Trump. And, we love the integrity of Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. RFK Jr., who couldn't win. He had no support, very little support outside of the online agitators. And somehow he made some great sacrifice and was blocked from the Democratic nomination. But someone who actually walked away from their congressional seat and potentially being the Speaker of the House is an evil figure. I can't abide by that. And in the case of Dick Cheney, credit to him. I don't like him. I went through the 2000 recount. In fact, I was on the ground in Palm Beach County on Election Day, November 7th, 2000. Anyone who wants to know my story about the 2000 recount, Google my name and recount. A lot of the stuff is behind paywalls now, but in archives and newspapers. But I played a pretty prominent role in that recount. I think the worst of Dick Cheney. But respect for someone who puts country first. And this to be the case against Kamala Harris is crazy. And I have to say one last thing. I think a lot of these people on the alt-left, and I didn't want to believe it after Sanders Clinton, right? I pushed back on it. But there were people who were telling me, Democratic friends, like, you don't want to be associated with this crowd. They're misogynistic. And I would say, oh, no, that's ridiculous. All the Hillary supporters are claiming anyone who supports anyone else is anti-woman. But as I've seen this evolve the last 8 years and seen some of the choices they've made, I think a fair number of them are misogynistic and are listening. They think it's very manly, even the females in the movement, to listen to Jimmy Dore and what is the other one, Joe Rogan, right? And mimic and parrot their talking points. They don't seem to want to support women for big positions. A lot of these people, they wouldn't back Glenn Graham for governor either in this state. So, I mean, there's a pattern, right? So, even have seen it in state senate and state house races, quite frankly. So I'm not saying that's all of them. I'm not even saying that's the majority of them, but I think there's a fair number of them that are misogynistic. As time goes on, I realize Hillary Clinton was right about a lot of things that I didn't quite see in 2016. She was right about a lot of things. And so, that's my thoughts. And I respect people who understand what's at stake in this election and why, in order to defend the American system and the constitutional republic we're in, the democracy we're in, that certain choices have to be made, certain compromises have to be made. And that means sometimes you have to jump into bed with people you don't like in order to hold the barbarians at the gate, so to speak. And I think that's where we are right now. I think that's the bottom line. And so I'm someone who welcomes the Cheneys. I'm someone who has really appreciated the analysis of the likes of David Frum and Bill Kristol. I always liked David Frum, even in the 90s. I thought he was the intellectual conservative, so I paid attention to him. But the others were people I didn't like. Mona Sharon, I didn't like. David Brooks, I didn't like. Now I really respect them, and they make great points, and they're making sacrifices. Okay, so I'm kind of done with that alt-left movement completely. Even when they make good points, I'm thinking now they're making them for the wrong or the sinister reasons. They're not doing it because they're really interested in economics. They're not doing it because they're interested in working class issues. They're doing it because they have some sort of built-in bias against the Democratic Party and some sort of, in some cases, some sort of misogynistic streak in them. So anyway, thank you.